Welcome into OutKick the show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I hope all of you are having phenomenal Mondays. Jan 6th, 2025. Quite the historic day. We're going to break all that down for you. NFL playoffs are set. We've got college football playoff action. Honestly, if you're a football fan, it doesn't get much better than Thursday football, Friday football, Saturday football, Sunday football, Monday football. 5 days in a row coming up of playoff football action, both college and pro. I'm going to be watching every single day. That's because it's playoff time now or never. Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, where you can win up to 1,000 times your money. Prize Picks offers MasterCard quick and easy deposits into the account. I appreciate everybody enjoying and playing along here. California, Texas, Florida, my home state of Tennessee, you can play. Download the app today. Use code OutKick to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is, download the app, code OutKick, $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. And I'm going to run a bunch of game here, starting with the NFL. And I want to say this, congratulations to the Detroit Lions. Long-suffering, never-winning, playoff, even advancing to franchise. My wife is from the Detroit area. I've been married to her for 20 years now. I have heard from all of her friends and family that are longtime Lions fans how devastating it was to root for the Detroit Lions. Last night, they won to finish the season 15-2. Only one bye now in the NFL. Number one seed Detroit Lions, number one seed Kansas City Chiefs. I want this to be the Super Bowl. This is what I'm rooting for. I'll talk about my Titans getting the number one overall pick and what I think they should do. But I want the Super Bowl to be the Detroit Lions against the Buffalo Bills. The long-suffering Buffalo Bills fans going head-to-head with the long-suffering Detroit Lions fans, where we know that one of those fan bases, which has been completely bereft of victory forever, essentially, would get a Super Bowl, would be, I think, the best possible Super Bowl taking place down in New Orleans on Fox. I will be there. I cannot wait. But congratulations to long-suffering Lions fans. Put me down, rooting for there to be a Lions versus Bills Super Bowl. By the way, my MVP pick, Josh Allen. Reason I'm going Josh Allen, Derrick Henry had another amazing game. Rushed for, I believe, over 1,900 yards. It's not a coincidence that Lamar Jackson had the greatest passing season of his career with Derrick Henry to hand off to. I talked about this, I think, on Friday's show. Derrick Henry was so good, he made Ryan Tannehill $100 million. Ryan Tannehill has never had any success in the NFL of any substantial degree without being able to hand off to Derrick Henry. He starts being able to hand off to Derrick Henry. Play action pass has to be respected by the entire defense. Third down conversions, big-time playmaking. Remember, Ryan Tannehill won multiple playoff games barely throwing for any yards at all because the one year the Titans went to the AFC Championship, Derrick Henry was the engine driving that offense. And the same thing is true. As good as Lamar Jackson has been, he's been great this year. Derrick Henry is what has taken him to the next level, in my opinion, as a passer, in the same way that it did for Ryan Tannehill. So no disrespect to Lamar Jackson. You guys heard me break down, in my opinion, there's no doubt, the four best quarterbacks in the NFL right now, in order, in my opinion: Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow. Those, to me, beyond a shadow of a doubt, are the four best quarterbacks in the NFL. Now, you can argue with my order. Certainly you can say, hey, Clay, Joe Burrow, can you imagine if he had Andy Reid as a coach? Really good question. You can say, hey, Josh Allen, can you imagine what he would be capable of if he were able to hand off to Derrick Henry? You can say Patrick Mahomes. Guy's already won 3 Super Bowls and 3 MVPs. He doesn't even have a healthy receiver this year. Can you imagine what he would be capable of if he were handing off to Derrick Henry? All of those could be worthy of argument, which is why I think you can make an argument in any direction for the top four. All those guys, by the way, under 30 years old. Some of you out there, you're like, well, what about Jalen Hurts? What about Jaden Daniels? What about Jared Goff? What about Matthew Stafford? Whoever you want to toss into the equation, you are readily able and capable of making those arguments. But to me, you really can't. The Mount Rushmore, in no particular order, although this is my direct order, Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, and Joe Burrow, beyond a shadow of a doubt, 4 best quarterbacks, which is why I was kind of hoping the Bengals were going to make the playoffs instead of the Broncos. No disrespect to Bo Nix, Sean Payton, Denver Broncos. It's been a while since the Broncos were in the postseason. But the Kansas City Chiefs laid down, and I think they did it because they were perfectly fine not having the Cincinnati Bengals into the postseason. And I think if you're asking anybody out there, would you rather play the Broncos and Bo Nix, or would you rather play the way that they're playing right now, Joe Burrow and the Bengals? I think almost everybody out there would say they would rather play Bo Nix and the Broncos. Doesn't mean that the Broncos don't deserve to be there. The Bengals lost a lot. Bad games start the season. They had to win their final 5 to even put themselves in a position to potentially make the playoffs. They were 4-8, if I'm not mistaken. But I think the Bengals in the playoffs as the 7 seed would have been a better watch against the 2 seed than I do with the Broncos in. With that in mind, NFL playoffs are set. Let me hit you with those matchups. As I said, I will be watching all of them. It's also Black Monday, even though Stephen A. Smith says it's an unfair phrase. I knew this was going to happen. Like, oh, Black Monday, which is just a reference historically to a good thing. It's when many retailers just actually start to make money. You know that? That's the historic resonance of it. The Monday after Thanksgiving is typically when retailers start to move into the black, and the black is actually a good thing because it's a profit. Red is a loss. A lot of people don't even know that, I don't think. But so Black Monday in historic lineage is not a negative pejorative. It's actually a positive connotation. Now, Black Monday in the NFL has taken on the context of, oh, it's when everybody gets fired. And I certainly understand that. But by the way, here's your lineup. Saturday, Chargers, Texans. I'm going to take the Chargers in that game. We'll be breaking this down on Thursday. This is my early read. Steelers, Ravens. I'm just picking straight up, not against the number. I think the Ravens are going to win. Bills, Broncos. That's Saturday's games, by the way. So I like Ravens and Chargers on Saturday. Sunday, I'm going to take the Bills to beat the Broncos. I'm going to take the Eagles to beat the Packers. And I'm going to take, man, that's going to be a really good game. The Commanders, Redskins in my world, against the Bucks. That's going to be a really, really good one. I think I might be inclined to take the Commanders, the Redskins, to win that game. And then Vikings, Rams, I'm going to take the Vikings in a close game against the Rams. Those are your games. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, the 6 wild card playoff games that will be taking place this weekend. I can't wait to watch all of them. Okay. I want to give credit. On Friday's show, I ripped ESPN to the high heavens, deservedly so, for not covering the moment of silence in New Orleans, the national anthem, Notre Dame running on the field with the flag, or all of those fabulous people in the Superdome chanting USA, USA, as they did. ESPN failed in their primary job, which is just sharing. All they had to do was just share the amazing scene that took place inside of the Superdome the day after that terror attack. They couldn't do it. That thing went mega viral everywhere. I'm pulling it up to see the absolute latest numbers. On TikTok, 2.1 million views of me talking about that from Friday's show. You can follow OutKick on TikTok at OutKick Sports. Also, I'm on there. I haven't posted in a while. I need to get back to posting on TikTok. But 2.1 million people on TikTok alone watched that. Millions of people additionally watched it on Instagram, watched it on Twitter. In fact, let's see exactly how we did on Twitter. I'll scroll down and see how many people ended up watching that clip on Twitter as well. But like I said, 2.1 million on TikTok, millions more on Instagram, Facebook. The audience that this show continues to unlock is frankly pretty staggering on a day-to-day basis to see what this audience is now capable of. I am consistently blown away by how well these videos do. And I give credit to our social team for clipping and sharing them and making sure everybody gets the opportunity to watch them, even if you don't watch or listen to this program. And by the way, I've got a big article up. Maybe I need to retweet that. I will do that retweet on that. About 9 years ago, ESPN made a documentary. I'm going to talk about this in a sec, about the George W. Bush first pitch. And then they couldn't even manage to cover that patriotic moment. On social media, on Twitter, 1.7 million views. All right? So just on TikTok and just on Twitter alone, that video that I did on Friday's show had 3.8 million views. Millions more views on Facebook, millions more views on Instagram. Lots of people clipped it. They shared it. And the reason was because ESPN failed utterly. Credit. I talked to a lot of different executives, CBS, NBC, Fox, even some at ESPN. They couldn't believe that ESPN didn't cover the moment of silence or the national anthem. Credit the SEC network did. Do you know what all those other networks did on their games Sunday? They covered the national anthem, including Fox doing an amazing job showing it for the entire nation for the New Orleans Saints game. ESPN won't admit they were wrong, but on Saturday, they had the national anthem and the moment of silence that they showed for both NFL games. So why do I bring this up? This is what I wrote about. You can go read it. It's up on OutKick right now. It's up on my Twitter feed at Clay Travis. It's emblematic to me of the collapse of ESPN. 9 years ago in 2015, ESPN made a 30 for 30 called simply First Pitch. It was about George W. Bush in October of 2001 walking out Game 3 World Series, iconic moment in sports. He starts off in the Yankees dugout, walks out. Bush, you later find out, is wearing a bulletproof vest. The Yankees were hosting Game 3 in the wake of the September 11th terror attack in 2001. Bush rears back, throws an absolutely perfect strike. And it was such an iconic moment in sports that ESPN turned that into a documentary. That documentary came out 14 years later on the anniversary of 9/11 in 2015 as a part of their 30 for 30 broadcast. 9 years later, they didn't even cover the moment of silence for terror victims occurring in the city where the terror attack was a day after the terror attack itself, when they had to reschedule the Sugar Bowl. And as a result, they cheated everyone. It was a failure of epic magnitude. And I wrote in that article, what does it say about the culture of ESPN? That in 9 years, they've gone from making a documentary called First Pitch about the unifying moment of an American president going out and throwing a first pitch on the mound at Yankee Stadium during the World Series, a month after the terror attacks, to a day after the New Orleans terror attacks, they won't even cover it. I think it's emblematic of the destructive culture that ESPN has allowed to be created inside of their network. And I wrote addressing two specific groups that I want to address on video right now as well. The three most powerful people at ESPN are Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, Jimmy Pitaro, the president of ESPN, and Burt Magnus, the vice president of production at ESPN. All three of these guys are big sports fans. Are you proud of the culture that you've created at ESPN? That in the space of 9 years, you've gone from making a 30 for 30 documentary about George W. Bush throwing a first pitch, regardless of his politics, that united the country, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, gay, straight, male, female, all together in unity to fight terrorists. That 9 years later, the day after a terror attack in New Orleans, your company, either due to incompetence or intent, which I will discuss, both are bad, chose not to cover the national anthem or the moment of silence or Notre Dame running on the field with the flag or the chanting USA, USA, USA. You cheated us. You, ESPN, cheated America from a moment of unity brought by sports, from a statement from all those brave people inside of the Superdome when they started to chant USA, USA, that they would not be conquered, that they would not bow down to terrorism, that they were going to rise above it, and that the United States united condemned the acts of the terrorist. You and the culture that you created the failure there. And I don't want to hear about, it wasn't important to carry the moment of silence. You covered the moment of silence for the Don't Say Gay bill during the South Carolina Howard basketball game, live on your air. You paused for that, even though the vast majority of Americans actually agree with what that bill did in Florida, which said we're not going to give gender instructions to kids in kindergarten, first, second, or third grade. You carried that moment of silence, and you couldn't carry the moment of silence in New Orleans the day after 14 innocent people of all different backgrounds were murdered. Unacceptable. Also, what do you say about the culture you've created? Bob Iger, Jimmy Pitaro, Burt Magnus. Either you have enabled and promoted such an incompetent leadership group that they weren't able to intentionally air those moments because of their incompetence, which I don't believe, or you have so elevated a woke DEI anti-America cadre of leaders that they weren't willing to actually cover an iconic moment in American sports history. Both are bad. I think it's the latter. But in both cases, the culture you created has been destroyed over the last 9 years. Are you proud of that? You shouldn't be. And if you're proud of it, purely from a business perspective, and I don't think they're proud of it, purely from a business perspective, when you go direct to consumer, the consumer decides now whether they want your channel or not. Nobody wants woke ESPN. You've destroyed a brand. You've destroyed a culture. What are you going to do to fix it? It's embarrassing. That's for those three men. Let me also address the sports media, and I want to make sure that we clip this too. You guys are pathetic cowards. You sit around all the time on your typewriters, on your laptops, writing full articles like, I can't believe Tony Romo in the third quarter didn't accurately analyze the decision-making of the head coach. This was bad broadcast booth work. Oh, let me give you my opinion on how Tom Brady is doing in the booth. Let me dissect every word that he said during a game. But you won't actually cover what people at CBS, NBC, Fox, and ESPN all rightly called the biggest production error of a sports broadcast in the 21st century, when they didn't cover the national anthem, the moment of silence, the USA chants, Notre Dame running on the field with the American flag. Every sports network covered it in the NFL, even though it wasn't the day after the terror event in the city where the terror event happened that required the game to be moved by a day. If you're in sports media and you're supposed to be a critic, how big of a pussy do you have to be to not even address it, which none of them did? And you want to know why OutKick keeps growing? It's because we're fearless in a world that is filled with cowards. But if you're a sports media critic, what do you do when you look in the mirror and because of politics, you don't even address the biggest failure of sports broadcasting this generation? Meanwhile, you're sitting around talking about Tony Romo or Pat McAfee or Kirk Herbstreit or Tom Brady or any number of other analysts, critiquing them on a minute-by-minute basis about what they say, and you guys are such friggin' cowards that you won't even address a generationally awful decision when it comes to producing a huge game for ESPN because you're worried about upsetting executives. And if you upset executives, they won't give you a 5-minute heads up on some press release they're about to release about the new NASCAR TV deal so you can get on Twitter and put it out before everybody else. You guys are pathetic. You know who you are. Most people don't know who you are. I do. I hope you look in the mirror and realize what jokes you all are in the way that you've covered this and the way that you continue to cover sports. But you know who benefits? Your boy. Because this is why OutKick keeps growing, because in an age of inauthentic liars and complete left-wing woke lunatics, we are covering 90% of Americans out there, sports, by just saying a couple of simple truths. Sports are good. Boys should compete against boys, and girls should compete against girls. The meritocracy should be encouraged. Amen. Thank you for all your support. You know who the dumbest person is on television, in my always humble opinion? Appearing on television on a daily basis. Actually, Sunny Hostin on The View. Today is the 4-year anniversary of January 6, 2021, a day that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have said is the worst day in America since the Civil War. Now, I've been on this for a while. I'm a history nerd. Anyone who says that is both historically illiterate and also a moron, because Pearl Harbor is kind of a big day. Kind of a bad day for America when we got attacked by Japan and drawn into World War II. 9/11, among others, certainly the Great Depression, but 9/11, when we were attacked by Muslim fundamentalist terrorists and they destroyed the trade centers and flew into the Pentagon, also a pretty awful day for America. Compared to January 6th, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have tried to make that argument. I did think it was just desserts for Kamala Harris. Congratulations to her for becoming the first black woman to ever preside over the Senate and count all the electoral votes that symbolized her defeat. 312 electoral votes for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. And that, she shattered that glass ceiling. Congratulations to Kamala Harris for, again, counting the votes to show everybody how bad she lost. Huge moment for black women and women in particular everywhere. But Sunny Hostin is actually dumber than Kamala Harris. She's actually dumber than Joe Biden. She's dumber than Joy Behar. She's dumber than Whoopi Goldberg. She is the dumbest person appearing daily on television in America. She just is historically illiterate. And also, even with a huge staff of people to try to keep her from being a moron, she said this today. Watch.
I think we need to find moral clarity, in this country. And I just remember after January 6th, you had someone like Mitch McConnell placing the blame on January 6th where it belonged, squarely on Donald Trump's shoulders. Mm-hmm. And then you started seeing people backtrack that and losing their moral center. You had Condoleezza Rice, I believe, on this very show saying, we need to move on from January 6th. Mm-hmm. I say no. You don't move on, because January 6th was an atrocity. It was one of the worst moments in American history. And when you think about the worst moments in American history, like World War II, things that happened, like the Holocaust, chattel slavery, We need to never forget, because past becomes prologue if you forget any race.
She's so dumb, it makes my brain actually hurt for her stupidity. She compared January 6th to the Holocaust. Concentration camps by Nazis that killed 6 million Jews is similar to a protest 4 years ago on January 6th, where only one person died, Ashley Babbitt, inside of the Capitol, and that's because she was shot by a police officer. She compared it to the Holocaust. First of all, America's actually on the good side when it comes to the Holocaust. Do you know who freed most of the prisoners, many of them, inside of concentration camps? American soldiers. So you don't understand American history if you reference the Holocaust and you blame America for the Holocaust. You're a moron, as clearly she is. But it's a multi-year attempt to exterminate the Jews. Everyone who's Jewish should be utterly baffled, befuddled, and castigating this woman like crazy, and so should everyone who's not Jewish. Also, slavery. Look, every single person watching this or listening to this right now, at some point in your history, has either had relatives, ancestors, who were slaves and or enslavers. Every single person. Because slavery was actually incredibly common throughout human history. I know that morons without much knowledge of world history try to say that United States slavery was some kind of unique outlier. The reality is it was not. White people, Asian people, Hispanic people, black people, everybody has been slaves and has been enslavers. We all have that blood inside of our veins because all of our ancestors did both. You have to be a historical moron not to understand this. Sunny Hostin herself went viral recently when it was determined that her ancestors in recent history in Puerto Rico owned slaves, and that was one way that her family became wealthy. Okay? She's an imbecile. But to compare January 6th to the Civil War in any way is crazy. To compare it to the Holocaust or slavery is so dumb that if ABC had any intelligent leadership at all, which it's Bob Iger, so they may well not, they would pull her off the air, not for what she said, but because she is too dumb to continue to be able to go on air. Moreover, if you are a fan of Sunny Hostin, and I don't know that these people exist, you are actually too dumb to watch television. Because the only thing dumber than Sunny Hostin is Sunny Hostin's fans. And if you guys think I'm being unfair, I will continue to utter, they called me a white supremacist on The View. I will continue to offer this. I will show up on The View solo, and I will take the 4 or 5 of them on 5-1, 4-1, whatever numbers. They can bring in reinforcements if they need it. And I will go into their studio in front of their live studio audience, and I will rise up and dunk on them harder than Scottie Pippen on Patrick Ewing back in the day. I will hang on the rim. I will go balls to the face on them. I will be completely without mercy because I would utterly eviscerate them, debating any subject, anytime, any place, anywhere that they want me to show up. I will show up and eviscerate them. But Sunny Hostin is the dumbest person on television on a daily basis, and actually an insult to Disney and ABC that she continues to be given the opportunity to do that show. By the way, if she wanted to leave and do her own show, that's fine. Nobody would watch. It'll be like Don Lemon. Don Lemon's on CNN for 20 years. He has no actual fan base. Nobody cares about him. Guy leaves CNN, he can't even get 200 people to watch his YouTube channel. No platform, no audience, no significance. It's not just Don Lemon. There's lots of dudes like that. Anderson Cooper, Jake Tapper, most of the people on MSNBC. They couldn't make a living in media without the networks paying them to be on their shows. Sonny Hostin's a perfect example of this. A couple of final thoughts here as I break down everything. There's a big lawsuit that got filed against Fox by a former makeup artist, hairdresser. I read it. I know her. I know all the people that are named in the lawsuit. I don't have any knowledge. I'm not named in the suit. I'm like the only person in media, knock on wood, who's never been sued so far in 20 years for anything. But it's circulating. You can go read about it if you want. I don't know anything. I'm not named in the lawsuit. So far, your boy typically stays out of the courts. Doesn't mean I'm not going to get sued at some point. Probably I will, because the platform just keeps getting bigger and bigger. But so far, I've never been sued. My general position is be skeptical of any lawsuit until you read both sides of the lawsuit. In other words, somebody files a lawsuit, they allege ABC happened, and then the other side gets to respond, and they say, actually, ABC didn't happen. And until you read both sides of a story, I tend to be skeptical of any one side of a story. Does that make sense? So I think everybody's entitled to their defense, and that's my take to the extent people are like, oh, what do you think about the Fox Sports related lawsuit? That's my take. Again, I'm not named. I do know everybody that is named. Some of them are close friends. Others of them are, work acquaintances, coworkers, whatever you want to call it. But that's my take in general. I'm not named. I wasn't a witness to my knowledge, any of the allegations made in that complaint. So that's my take on that. To the extent anybody wants to know, hey, what do you think about this? I'm not trying to avoid anything. I just don't have any additional knowledge other than what was put in that lawsuit as to whether or not it's true. That's for the courts to determine. Couple of other things here that I flagged. Titans now have the number 1 overall pick. Thank the Lord the Titans did not win that game. First of all, I would trade down. We're going to have tons of time to talk. Titans are on the clock. I'm not a believer in Carson Beck or Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders as being worthy, any quarterback in this class, as being worthy of the overall number 1 pick. I also don't have a lot of faith that the Titans are not going to blow it. I would, in my opinion, probably just take Travis Hunter if I couldn't trade back. I would rather trade back, get multiple picks. I think the Titans have a lot of holes. But if you couldn't get value for that pick, I would probably take Travis Hunter at number 1 overall. I hope somebody will trade up like what happened years ago. The Titans traded back, and they already had a quarterback at that time. The Titans certainly don't have a quarterback now. But again, I think the unfortunate aspect of this is I'm not sure there's some 1 or 2 dudes up there that I really have a lot of faith in. Like last year, I had a lot of faith in Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams not played that well. We'll see what happens going forward. Jaden Daniels played really well. So I would have been fine with the Titans taking either of those guys if they had the number 1 overall pick last year. I'm not sold on it as much this year, kind of going forward, breaking all that down. Finally, I don't know how many of you saw this video. Maybe we need to grab the video tomorrow, and I need to react to it there. Let's do that. Haley, will you remember to grab this? Did you see the DoorDasher who rushed up to the door and begged to use the bathroom because he had major diarrhea? I have strong thoughts on this, but I want to play the video for all of you before I react. We'll have some fun with that tomorrow. Appreciate all. I also want to talk about NBC before I forget. NBC News. NBC News in June, on June 14th, accused me of spreading cheap fakes for sharing a Joe Biden video that showed that Biden clearly did not have the mental, physical capacities to be president. I believe it was from the G7, but I've shared a bunch of those videos over the years. NBC News wrote an entire article. They requested comment from me. I told them that the video that I shared, in my opinion, I'm paraphrasing, clearly showed Joe Biden did not have the mental or physical capacity to be president. 13 days after that article ran, Biden went out on the stage for the June 27th debate and got totally crushed and dropped out of the race. So I was right. Very few people even argue that Biden has the ability to be president right now, much less to continue to serve beyond January 20th. He clearly doesn't, okay? Why do I bring this up? Because Sunday on Meet the Press, Kristen Welker, who now hosts Meet the Press, called out Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader, and asked him whether he regretted calling it right-wing propaganda that Biden wasn't able to be president. And he hemmed and hawed and tried to dodge. My question and my challenge for Kristen Welker at NBC News: why don't you apologize to me and others who NBC News accused of spreading cheap fakes now that you acknowledge what I told everybody in June, which is that Joe Biden doesn't have the mental or physical capacity to be president? I was right. NBC News, Legacy Media Network, was wrong. If you're going to call out Chuck Schumer, why don't you call out your own network, which did the exact same thing as him? And why don't you apologize to everyone who you accused of spreading propaganda and cheap fakes? And also, and this is a longer form discussion, this is part and parcel of why the media is worthless in many ways. I tell you exactly what I think. No one is telling me, hey, Clay, will you cover this story and give this opinion? Nobody even tries. You may not agree with me. Nobody is out there like, hey, I want you to say this. Doesn't work, okay? What happens with all these legacy media organizations is most journalists are lazy. They don't actually do any work. Somebody takes them an attack that they want to be made against someone or something, and they do all the work, and they hand it off, and they try to get them to publish it, either online, newspaper, whatever else. They try to then launder that attack and say, oh, look, the Washington Post wrote this, the New York Times wrote this, ABC, CBS, NBC, they all wrote this. It's all BS propaganda. And it's laundered from one side to attack the other, okay? We have very few people who call balls and strikes in media. Most of the time, they're actually just taking left-wing attacks, and instead of the campaign or the person who wants the attack to be levied doing it in their own voice, they find somebody in the media to do it for them. That is the reality of where we are. And I think that sums up the NBC News pivot from Joe Biden is sharp as attack, and anybody telling you otherwise is spreading propaganda, to, oh, by the way, look at how Chuck Schumer was spreading propaganda. It was the same propaganda that you were spreading, NBC News. All right. I love all of you. I'll be back tomorrow. DBAP unless you need to SBAP. Happy New Year if this is your first day back. Go subscribe to the OutKick the Show feed. The YouTube channel as we approach 2 million subscribers there. As I mentioned, a lot of these clips just taking off. Good job by our social team. What was that? 3.8 million views from something I did Friday that we clipped just on TikTok and just on Twitter by itself. This thing is a juggernaut. We continue to grow because so many people are not smart. They're not original. They're not funny. They're not authentic. We try to do all those things at OutKick every single day. Love you. DBAP, unless you need to SBAP. I have been and always will be, hopefully, Clay Travis.